Hello, it's time for another sim release. This is version 0.56. And it's been a little while since I did a release on the sim. The last proper one I did was back in July of 2021 for the mobile edition. And I wanted to explain something about the delay in why it's taken so long to get here. So after that last release, I had a little bit of a break because it was quite hard getting things on those app stores, especially the Apple one. What a pain in the butt. But I sort of got back into things and started experimenting with what I wanted to do next. I brought out a video in November about the idea of some of the future directions and what I might be doing and going to use Unreal Engine in the development instead of the Unity engine, which I do at the moment. And whilst that potential move of game engines is still on the cards, I decided I still had some stuff in the current version I really wanted to finish off. And as we speak right now, although Unreal Engine 5 has been released, it's still not what I would call multi-platform. They're big sellers, which is the Nanite and Lumen technology, is still only working for Windows and next-gen consoles. It's not available for Linux or Mac, so I need it to be multi-platform, both for development and releasing stuff, else it's a bit pointless for me. Anyway, in that video, aside from some level ideas, I talked about the need to go back and restructure the code in a way where it would be easier to actually sort of make new levels. Because it was a bit of a mess, stuff had been sort of bolted on and we had to go through and restructure it. Restructuring code is perhaps the least interesting thing you can talk about. You can spend weeks and weeks doing so, which I did, and then at the end of it you'd have something exactly the same as what you'd already released, but it would internally be structured much better. And a side effect of this, because we managed to get rid of some code and asset duplication, is that having gone through that process, I shaved off about 400 megabytes to the ultimate size of the desktop versions. But in terms of doing something new, I had to make some changes. Now, I'm not in favour of simply updating something because there is the new update. But we had the situation, I was using this engine version from 2018, and I wanted to do some stuff, and one of which is to be able to poke holes in the terrain to make like a cave or a tunnel or something like that, and that wasn't supported. Also, the Play Store had changed the way you had to package your Android applications. Previously, we could use what's called an APK with an OBB extension because they limit the size of the application, but you could have these OBB files which count as like extensions for your initial APK. But they stopped all of that, and we're using this thing called AAB now, which is it's internally structured completely differently, and I needed the newer version of the engine to be able to produce those. So I moved everything over to Unity 2020, and what happens as soon as you move something is everything breaks. So then I took several weeks going through and fixing stuff and trying to get it to work again in the same way that it had before. And unfortunately, the side effect of moving to that later version is I can no longer support Linux 32-bit. Linux 64-bit still covered, Windows 32-bit for some reason is still covered, but they had dropped support for Linux 32. I apologise if you're running Linux 32. I can't do much about it. Please upgrade if you can. Anyway, so I got stuff working, but then I found that the weather system, at least running on my Mac, was just not working. It was just not producing any weather. It was just getting a sort of dim fog. Now, the weather system is something called Unistorm, which is an asset I bought in. I think it was maybe on offer one day, and I thought I might be able to integrate this, it'd be fun, and it kind of adds a little bit to the graphical fidelity of the sim, and I feel quite good fun to fly in a rainstorm or fog and stuff like that. So it's something I quite liked. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but it was there, and having had it working, I wanted it to work again. So this was back in December when I got to this point. I let the studio that developed it know there was a problem with it, and what could I do to fix it. And it kind of came down to he didn't know, and he didn't have a Mac to test on, and thus he just didn't know, which I found a bit shoddy. I mean, I develop on a Mac, but before I release anything I test it on Windows, I test it on Linux. When I'm developing the mobile apps, I mean, I bought this just so I could make sure I could test it out on Android and make sure things work properly. So I found that a little bit shoddy, and we exchanged mails, but it got to the point I was trying to show him how fundamental it was, because it wasn't just my code. I could take his product, get his demo scene, put it in a brand new project, and it would fail. And I was like, what's going on there? If you tell me where you think the problem is, I can help you to debug it. I've got the system here. And I just couldn't get anything back from him. And this went on and on for months. So boo Unistorm and the company Black Horizon Studios. You suck. Anyway, in March, I decided I wasn't going to get any help from this guy whatsoever, and he was completely useless and crap. So I decided I would have to try and debug this problem myself. I figured that the problem was in the shader code, and the problem was I didn't know shader code. Shader code is very specific. It's basically the language that talks directly on your graphics card and runs. It looks a bit like C, but it's all very different. It's kind of hard to learn. It's written in a thing called HLSL, I think, High Level Shader Language. And yeah, I spent a long time trying to learn this because it's not quite as easy, and you can't easily get debug from it because it's running on the graphics card, and you can't just, you know, do a printf statement like you would in normal code. And if you want to learn shader code, I can recommend the quite long tutorials from Freya Holmer, who did some stuff on shader basics. Those really helped me get the grasp of what was happening and what was going on. And I spent weeks looking at this, and eventually I found the problem and I fixed the problem. And it started working on Mac, and I realised this was the key to the problem, that I'd had to use a workaround in the previous Android version, which meant the graphics and colour in the city wasn't quite right. It was all a little bit dark and drab, and this fix would fix that. Now, have I told the studio what fix I did and how they could fix their code? No, screw those guys. Why should I? If they want to make me an offer for messing me about for 4 months and leaving me sort of stranded without being able to work on my code, I'll think about it. If not, they're on their own. Now, in the last few weeks, I felt quite under the weather. I felt all sort of muscle aches and sort of so tired or fatigued. The heart gets racing if you walk a couple of steps. It's like I've got a COVID, but according to the tests, I don't have COVID. I wanted to be out flying planes and quads, but I haven't had the energy. I haven't been able to get myself into it and try and do it. But I have been able to sit down at this desk and type stuff. And that's been really useful for the sim, because I've knocked out a lot of code in the last 3 weeks and getting to this point in release. I thought it would take a lot longer. So hurrah for that, and hopefully I feel better and actually get out flying. Enough sob stories. Let me tell you about the sim. Now, first off, I should explain this is the desktop release. As far as the mobile release goes, I think Android is done, and there's some pretty cool things I think that I've managed to do in terms of helping the performance and stuff. But I haven't started on iOS yet, and as of now, just going over to an iOS project, it doesn't compile, and there's a lot more hoops to jump through to get those into the app stores. And I'm just about to go away for about 10 days, and I thought that's not going to get done in time. Let's get desktop out. We'll sort out the mobile versions when we get back. So let me fire this thing up and show you what's been going on. Okay, so his sim looks pretty familiar, and I should talk about Joshua Bardwell, because ages ago he did a sim roundup, and one of the ones he tested along with Blunty was my one, and he didn't like it very much, and that's okay because people don't have to like it. I'm a big boy, I can take criticism. But a couple of useful things that came out of this is that he had some things that he looked at and immediately didn't like. And this was quite useful because, you know, I'd imagine if people actually got hold of it, they might take a little bit, you know, more effort to say, I don't know how to do this, I should find the instructions or something. Now, he didn't do that, but he did have some pretty interesting observations and things that happened on his system, which made me go back and look and say, ah, that's interesting. Now, the first thing he did was when he set it up, he went into the resolutions, and he had sort of multiple lines of like 1080p and stuff. And what this seems to be, I think, is the hertz rating. Now, I'm in front of my Mac screen here, and if I have a look at my resolutions, they're all 60 hertz. So when I first did this, I kind of looked at this and said, every resolution is different, they're all at the same hertz rate, therefore every screen would be the same, which is a mistake. This is because I'm on my specific Mac monitor and it runs at 60 hertz. If I was to take this and move this to my gaming monitor over here, you will see that the resolution options, we have some multiples. We have something that will run at 75 hertz, and on that same resolution will run at 144 hertz. And I'm sure for PCs with different monitors and different graphics card. There are a whole host of different information there. So what I've basically done is add in that hertz rating. So now you know your resolution and specific hertz it will run at. That's one simple change there. Now the other thing he didn't like was the way the graphics worked. Significantly the way the screen worked in terms of like he was mentioning about the Y direction stretching. So instead of a ball looking like a ball, it would look like an egg. And this is true to a certain situation. I was using something to sort of simulate a camera the best I could and try and get the most angle out of it without distorting too much. I have changed this, so if your image is in the center of the screen, like this ball is, it should look more like a ball. Now you will notice if I'm center, then the ball looks like a ball. But if I get lower than it, so if I land straight in front of it, like, whoops, this, it will elongate again. And that is kind of how 3D graphics work in this situation. There will be a certain amount of distortion on the screen, and it amplified by the fact that you can change your lens to whatever you like and it will stretch things out a bit. But this is kind of true of how FPV cameras work. The center of the screen is normally your distortion free zone. As you get towards the ends, things will sort of warp. Of course, you probably don't notice this because you're looking towards the center of your screen, but have a look back at your DVR footage and have a look over the corners. So yeah, there is going to be a certain amount of warping no matter what, but that central image is now square, so it won't distort if you're central. Now another thing they seem to have problems with finding instructions for stuff. There is a wiki built in and there was a keys and instructions, but what I decided to do, rather than just have like a massive set of keys, is try and write more instructions about generally how you'd set the radio up and what the advanced radio setting is for. More importantly, with the quick menu, because in most terms, I just flick through these ones, most of the case you will just have to click on anywhere on the screen. If I'm flying along, I don't know what to do. If I click the mouse, everything is there. You change the gravity, change your flight mode, show the sticks, reset the quad, your sub-menus, the lot, it's all there. As long as you remember to click the screen, you should be okay. But there's more instructions there now. The other thing I did is, having just constructed a level, which is a bit more complicated, I felt I needed to kind of benchmark this for myself. So what I went ahead and did is have this FPS counter, which will sit in the corner there and tell you what you're doing. Now this is aimed to be sort of a quick bench test. It was mainly for me, really, to make sure it's okay. But then I realised that other people messing with stuff might find this useful. Now this could drop off quite significantly for me because I'm screen recording as well at the moment. And this will appear over the top of other stuff because it's designed to be a temporary thing. You wouldn't want it there all the time. And if I was to quit the application and go back into it, it wouldn't be there. It doesn't persist saves, but it's there so you know what's going on and you can tune it. The idea being that you can use this in terms of with the graphics level to decide what is best on your system. And I'll talk about stuff on the graphics level a bit later, but let's actually get to the new level so we can talk about it. And if you now go to change level, you have got a level select screen. Hooray! And that's when new levels get added. It will be a lot easier. City level's still there, and the new one's called the value level. All you do is just click on the level you want, it will load, and you're off and running. So let's get into this level pretty quickly. So the idea of the value level is, first off, I was trying to get it bigger, but this actually turned out to be slightly smaller than the other levels. But what I wanted to go for is densely packed. And I like flying around trees, so I wanted to make sure there are going to be a lot of trees here, so I could try and fly through the trees, make sort of tight turns around them, things like that. Generally have fun playing around with the trees like I normally do. There are a lot of trees there, and there's, I wouldn't quite call it forests, it's not quite that dense, but there's plenty of them. Another new thing in this level is water, in terms of water will now damage you. So if I was going along and I got a bit low, I would basically slowly sink to the bottom, and the only thing I could do at that point is reset the quad, because water kills quads essentially. We do not have waterproof quads in this game. So the other thing I did with this level, and it's what I mentioned about wanting to poke holes in the scenery, and I showed this in the teaser, I've put a series of little tunnels or caves throughout the map, mostly because it's kind of fun to fly through and a little bit challenging to kind of decide where you're going and stuff. And so yeah, these are there's several of them, and I use the same technique to kind of construct this thing out of rock. I call this the sandcastle because it's kind of what it looks like, and it's yet, you know, another thing you can fly through and do things with if you want to. You will notice there is this road circuit which includes this bridge. This bridge is basically for people to be able to do flips and power loops and whatever they want to practice. You probably saw me getting a good old crash trying to do a Maddie flip through it, a bit like that. I've done it again. But yeah, it does work. And I put some cars on this road network, so if you go to scenarios, you've both got a chase mode for cars and planes. The planes have 2 tracks, the road circuit has 1, so you can say I want to chase several cars around please, and it will look like this. So the cars in this one, you will notice, go a little bit slower than previous tracks. This is because they are on this thin little road, and basically if I have them going faster they would fall off the end. So the road goes through this kind of little valley cut through the rocks where we've got a couple of arches in the way, and then we've got these big hairpin turns. This is where the cars would fall off, so it just wouldn't work there. And yeah, the track's quite fun to follow. You will notice there's a couple of other places where you've got the bridges to go under and stuff, and you will find, whoops, over here you can see another entrance to a cave there. But the reason there's only 1 track for the cars is it's impossible for the cars to go anywhere else, quite frankly, because it's not smooth enough anywhere else. But yeah, there's stuff to find in these woods and bits and pieces to check out there. And as I mentioned, there are plane circuits as well, so you can chase the plane around and do some stuff with that, essentially. Now you can use the weather effects on here. I've done a lot of work on getting them working, so I wanted to make sure that was fine. So as soon as you do that, you get a little bit more of an atmospheric effect, I think. You get this, there's a certain fog layer, so the atmosphere stops you seeing as far, which I think looks a little bit more realistic. You've got the clouds and stuff, and you've got the facility to change the time, so you can fly in something you're used to. I quite like the sort of sunset sunrise thing. The idea of these trees as well is they also will react to things like wind. The wind doesn't do anything particularly. I mean, if you hit the trunk of the tree you will go down. It's just, if you're used to flying in wind, then you can always turn the wind on and you can make it feel a bit more like home, and you can sort of watch the trees flutter around like so. So to explain a little bit more about what the graphical levels do when you're flying, this is me flying on Ultra, and what you will notice on Ultra is the tree models look quite good. You'll see if you have a look at the shadows, they will show up straight away there, and they will sort of persist, so I can look from any distance and I can see a shadow, and the trees look quite good from a distance, and as I get closer obviously the trees still look pretty good. If I was to change this, let's say even go as much as medium, then what you'll notice is the tree models look a little bit worse. This is measured by the level of detail settings. There are 3 levels of details for trees. There's actually another one where they just look in 2D. As I get closer, the level of detail will increase, but as I get further away it switches quite quickly to quite a low polygon model. You'll also see that if we look at the shadows, which should come from this way, the shadows aren't there until I get quite close to the trees, and then you will see the shadows drawn in. Shadows are quite expensive to do, so not doing them until you're up close and personal is quite a good way of saving CPU. And again, this is the sort of thing where I'd get in and I say, what can my system manage? Let's show the FPS counter. Let's put it on ultra. What sort of performance am I getting? And in my case, it's saying 30. It's the screen recordings holding it back. I can generally get 60. Oh, there you go. It's not to be believed completely. It's kind of quite a simple way of counting frames, but it gets the gist there. And of course, if you really want to go heavy duty about what is going to bring your frame rate down, it's putting weather system in as well. So the weather system saying it's running 1 every 2 frames here. So depending on what I wanted to do, now it's running at 60. Generally it runs at 60 on my system. But if I felt weather was important and the weather was causing it to have a drop, then what I might want to do is put my graphical detail settings down. But if I didn't feel that weather was important and I was getting 60 frames a second easily, then I might want to up my resolution or something like that. There's lots you can do to change things for the better. Obviously, by running in a lower resolution, you're rendering much less stuff and you can up your frame rate. Similarly, higher resolution, if that hits your frame rate but you want it, turn down your graphics level and then you will get a better experience that way. Basically, find what's worked for you best, and by using that frame counter, you should be able to get a decent idea of what is going to work for you or not. Now, when I get back, I will be, of course, finishing off the mobile version of the sim, and I'll do another video to talk about that, because there's plenty I want to talk about, depending how the iPhone iPad version turns out at the end of the day. But at least I've got Android running. I'm really pleased with it, actually, so that'll be there when I get back. In terms of what happens next with the sim, what I want to do, I'm quite keen on putting some sort of course in there. Now, I'm eager not to say racing, because I've mentioned before that I don't really like racing and the racing aspect of the sim, and I really do feel that the racing thing is much better well handled by the likes of Velocidrone or Liftoff or whatever. But I am quite keen on creating a course which is sort of challenging to go around, using more sort of the natural hazards of the landscape rather than just here is a field, here are a bunch of race gates. I'd prefer to put, like here, use the whole expanse of the course, since we don't have to think about only being on 25 milliwatts and only being in line of sight. I'd prefer to use all the level and make it sort of more interesting. And I'm thinking sort of in terms of how to do it, rather than just like here's a race gate, go through it, is like big pylons far apart for beginner racers, sort of coming down to sort of more goalpost type thing for intermediate, and you sort of experts or your sort of normal quad racers will have the sort of normal gate size thing. But yeah, I'd like to put that around all the courses in various ways and see what we can get from there. Anyway, so that'll be next time. In the meantime, this is ready to go. If you've already got it on Steam, by now it should hopefully be downloading into your library. If you haven't got it on Steam, consider doing that, because then I get a couple of pence out of it, and that all helps. But if you want to get it for free, you can do, and that's on the GitHub site. There's links down below from where you can do that. If you've got a particular problem, if you don't know what you're doing and you can't find the answer on the wiki, then drop me a line. There's an email address down there, and I will see you next time, hopefully feeling better and ready to release the mobile sims and doing some actual real life flying. Fingers as crossed in that. Anyway, catch you on the next one. Bye for now. Happy flying. Well, you've made it to the end of the video, so thanks once again for watching. If you like what you saw, then please consider subscribing, and if you really like what you saw, then be sure to check out the link to my blog for a variety of ways in which you can help support this channel.